Hi, and welcome to part 4 of my automating Active Directory groups with PowerShell. So in the first few videos, we've seen how to configure our XML file and validate that the groups exist and actually also create them if they don't exist, which gives us a resulting table of the groups that exist or don't exist and whether the create command was executed or not. So right now, what we have so far is this script here. So what I did notice when I went back here to actually look at it, I did see one of the mistakes that I've made. So we're going to start off with just correcting that. So what we did here is we had created a variable called XML data here, and we passed that into our XML parameter. But what I had noticed was in our function, instead of referencing the XML variable that we have here, I actually referenced XML data by accident here, so we're just going to remove that and set that to XML. And that is again in the validate groups function. It should be like around line 13, where we set the XML groups equals to XML.data.group and not XML data.data.group. So that's out of the way. So now we are going to go ahead and start with our script here. So what we're wanting to do is we're going to want to manage our groups. So what that means is we're going to add and remove the employees that belong in the groups based on the titles that are in the XML file and the titles that are in Active Directory. So what we're going to be doing is we're just going to write it out here just in the script, and then I'm going to be putting it in a function, and then I'm actually going to be doing the validate groups inside of that function as well. So all we're going to have to do is call one commandlet called manage groups, and it's going to do everything for us. And it's going to give us a log object, and I'm going to show you guys how to read that log object and output it to the screen. I'm just going to be outputting it to the screen, but you guys can output it to a file, to a database, to like anywhere you guys really want, depending on the needs for your script, depending on what type of production environment you guys are running it on. Or if you guys just are building it for fun, then just outputting it to the screen will be perfectly fine. So what we're going to do is take our validate groups here, and I'm actually just going to set that to a variable called groups. So we are going to be storing that. So if we run this here and we get groups, we actually do see that the programmers group does not exist, but the management group does exist. So I just want one of the groups right now because I actually do want one group that's false just to make our next steps a lot easier, because we're going to have to identify which groups actually exist, which groups don't, in order to automate them, because we don't want to automate a group that doesn't exist. For obvious reasons, it just doesn't exist, so we can't automate that group. So let's go ahead and let's get started. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to create that log object. So let's go ahead and let's do results. This is going to be our log object. We're going to set that to equals. And we are going to set this to a open and close square bracket. And we're going to set this to an array list, because this is going to hold all of our log entries similar to how we had it in our validate groups here. We had this result and then we had result entry kind of go in. So we're going to be building something very similar to that. All right, and now we have our groups from our validate groups. And then what we also want is we want to get the groups from the XML file. So we're going to do XML groups equals XML data here, because it's XML data here because this is what I'm pulling in from here. Once we put it into the function, we're going to have to change that again. This is where I went wrong in the first video. So I'm going to try to remember to do that here. So we're going to do .data.group. And if we just run all of this once again, we will see in our groups, we actually do have programmers and management, and we have the titles. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to loop through each of these groups in that XML file. So for that, we're going to use a for each loop, and we're going to do for each group in XML groups and open and close curly brackets here. And then what we're going to do here is we're actually going to have an if statement. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to check if the group that we are in the XML file actually exists. So this is where we're going to reference our groups variable from the validate groups and make sure that it exists. So to do that, we are going to do group.name, and then we're going to do a dash in. So this is going to check to see if it's inside of an array, if it's present in the array. And then what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to do a variable wrapper. So that is a $ open and close parentheses. And then we're going to grab our groups variable, and we're going to pipe that to a where object. And we're going to want to see exists dash equals true. So only where the exist is true. And we're going to grab the group name. So what we're going to do is we're just going to run this section here. You guys are going to see this only gives me management because management is the only one that is true. So that is perfect. So now we have that wrapped inside of our if statement. So let's do an open and close parentheses and then do our else open and close curly brackets once again. So this will basically be, so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to do a simple write host, and we're just going to do a group.name. You guys don't have to do this. This is mostly just to show you guys the logic behind what I'm doing here. But you guys can definitely write this down as well. It'll just help you remember like what part of the script we are in. So basically what I'm doing here is if the group goes in here, we know that it exists. If not, it does not exist. So if we run all of this now, we see programmers does not exist, management exists. That's perfect. That's what we want. We can see that in the verbose as well from the validate groups. So that is perfect. So what we're also going to want to do in the for each loop before the if statement, we are going to create our result entry variable. And this is going to start our log entry for each group. So we're going to do a new object, and we're going to do the type name of PS object here. And then we're going to go ahead and do an add member right away. And our input object is going to be the result entry. The member type is going to be a note property. The name is going to be validate result. And then the value is actually going to be, so for this, I'm actually just going to be storing the result from the validate groups for that specific group in here. And we're going to see why this is going to be useful for us a little bit later on. So we're going to wrap this in a variable wrapper here. So just a $ open and close parentheses. And then, oops, there you go. And then what we are going to want to do here is we're going to want to reference our groups. So groups where group name is equal to group.name. And then if we actually just look at this here, we will see that it's management. So that is perfect. And then what we're going to do at the end here, we're going to do result plus equals result entry. And then we're going to output our result here. So let's just run this. So we should only get the validate result column for both the management group and the programmers group, which we do. So here is our first look at what the log's going to look like. There's going to be a lot more columns to this log later on. But so far we have our validate result, which actually contains a object within it, which contains our group name, whether the group exists or not, and the notes for that group. So this is going to be super handy for us at the end. We're going to be able to output details about the group to the user running the script. All right, so what we first need to do is if the group exists. So if the group exists, we want to go ahead and grab all the users that belong to the group and all the users that already are in the group, and we want to compare those and also deal with the scenarios of if one is empty, or the other, like if there's no one with that position, because that would be users that belong to the group is empty, or in the case where the group did not have anyone that belongs in it, but now there are new people in that role. So we want to deal with all the different types of scenarios. This way we could prevent errors and handle those errors. So what we're going to want to do is we are going to want to do another variable here called titles in group. So here we are going to grab all the positions that belong in that group. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a $group dot titles dot title. So if I actually look at this here, we will actually see that we get CEO and project manager because those are the titles that belong to the management group. All right, and then what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to get all the users with these titles. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do another variable called users belong. And again, this is just, you guys can name it anything you guys want. I just find that this name is quite suitable because it's the users that belong in the group. So users belong equals get AD user, and then we're going to do a dash filter star because we want to grab all the users on the server, and we're just going to pass in our $server here. And then we are going to want to go ahead and grab all the properties as well. You could just grab the title property in this case, but we're just going to go ahead and grab all the properties. It's kind of handy if you want to do anything further down the line. You're already grabbing everything. And then we're going to pipe that to a where object title. It's going to be a dash in again. And then we're going to do is a dash in titles in group. All right, so then what we're going to do is just to see what we get as a result here, let's just do a users belong, select name and title. So let's see what we get here. So as we can see, the management exists and we get our 2 users that actually belong in the group. We get the name and the title. So that is perfect. So now let's go ahead and let's just remove this line. And let's get the users that are currently in the group. We're going to name this variable current users. And we're going to set that equal to get-AD group member. And then we're going to look at the identity of the group dot name on the server. All right, so now that we have our current users, and if we just look at this here and we grab that, we actually see that there is nobody in the group. So if we actually just go in here, we look at it, there's nobody in the group. So that's perfect. So this is actually going to show us the reason why we need to do that if statement. So what we can do here, just to show you guys the reason why we're doing an if statement, is we're going to do a compare object, and we are going to do the reference object. We are going to do the reference object. I like to usually reference the users that belong because we know the users that belong. And then the difference object will be the current users. Again, you guys could do this differently. Just remember that the arrows will be opposite. If you guys swap these, the arrows that I'm going to be using for the side indicator will be reversed. But we will see that in just a short moment. So if we just do this with an empty group, we will see that it's an error here. So we get compare object cannot bind argument to parameter difference object because it is null. So we're getting an error because there's no one in the group. So we actually have to deal with this for the current users, but also this would happen if the users belong was empty. So we need to deal with all the different scenarios. So let's just actually wrap this around. So what we're going to do is we're going to do an if users belong and current users, and then we're going to do open and close curly brackets. And this is where we're going to stick our compare object. Because this means if the users belong and the current users exist. So if none of them are null, compare the object. Else if users belong, open and close curly brackets. So in this case, only the users belong exists, current users is empty. What we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go ahead and just add all users. Actually, let's just do a write host here. Add all users to group. So this way we'll be able to see it. Then we have another else if current users. So this is if no one is in the role, but there are people in the group. What we're going to want to do is we're going to want to remove all users from the group. And then we have an else. So if both of them are null, we are actually just going to want to do nothing, no one in group, no one belongs to group. Now, what you could do in this case, we're not going to do anything. We're literally going to be doing nothing in this situation. But what you could do, depending on your needs, if there is a group that there's no one in it and there's just no one in it, no one that's going to be assigned to it, maybe you want to raise some sort of flag, maybe put something in the log file to look at that group. Maybe you don't need that group anymore. So that could be a scenario. Maybe the positions are spelt incorrectly in the file. So therefore, if the group is newly created and then there's only one position that belongs to it, but you made a typo in it in your XML file, this would kind of raise that flag. So that's pretty much it for these here. So let's go ahead and let's really work on this compare object here. So what we're going to do is we're going to store these results to a compare results. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually, we're going to run this just so we can see the output of add all users to group. And then we're going to add a user to the group. Perfect. So we have add all users to group. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add a user, and I'm going to add a user that actually does not belong in the group. So you could add any user to this as long as it's not a user that has the correct title of CEO or project manager. I'm adding one here that's the UX designer. So, oops, I forgot to actually apply it here. So let's just add the group here. Perfect. So now if we look at this here and we look at the compare results, we will see our side indicators. So if you inverse these reference and difference objects, so if you do your reference objects as the users currently in the group and your difference object as the users that belong to the group, your side indicators will be different, and that is okay. You just have to do the different side indicators. Whatever side indicator that I would do, you would just do the opposite to get the same effect. All right, and then what we're going to want to do is we have our input object here, and I don't really like to have the input object. All I like to do is I like to do a property of Sam account name here, and then we can just do this. And then in our compare results, we will have just the Sam account name and the side indicator. So that is perfect. So what we are going to want to do is we are going to want to go ahead and create two variables, one called adds and one called removes. The adds will obviously be to add to the group, and the removes will be to remove from the group. So we know that we need to remove this Wilkins, which is the arrow pointing towards the right, and then our two users that belong to the group is the arrows pointing towards the left. So let's create our adds here, which is going to be equals compare results. We're going to pipe that to a where object side, side indicator is equal to, and the arrow pointing towards the left. And then I am going to copy this line, and we are going to change adds to removes, and we are just going to change the weight of the arrow. And now if only the users belong exists, what I want to do is I want to do adds equals users belong. If only current users exists, I want to do removes equals current users. So basically what we're doing here is we're just saying, well, we need to remove all the users and current users anyways, so we're just going to set it to that. And then for the users belong, all of them need to be added, so we're just going to store that to the adds. And that again only happens if one of the groups are null. And in this case, we aren't doing anything in the else situation, so we can just leave it at that. And then what we're going to do is once we're out of this if-else situation here, we are going to do another couple if-else situations. So we're going to do if adds. So this is where if there is adds in our case, and then there's going to be an else. So if there is no adds, so if there is an add here, we are going to want to do a write host adding, or we can just do performing adds, and then we can just do write host no users to add. All right, and then we are just going to copy paste this if statement, and we're going to change adds to removes, and then performing removes, and then no users to remove. All right, perfect. So let's go ahead and let's run this here. So now if we run this, we will have performing adds, performing removes. So all we need to do is actually perform those actions. Now this is actually very easy to do for us. All we need to do is in the adds section. So if adds, we're going to do add AD group member, our identity, which is going to be group dot name, and then these, let's do members. And all we're going to do for members is actually adds dot sam account name. So this is actually just going to pass in the array of usernames. So this is going to be perfect. And then we're going to pass in our server variable here. That's awesome. And then what we are going to do is we are going to actually write to our log file right now. So we're going to do a add member input object, which is going to be our result entry. And then we are going to do our member type of no property name. And what we're going to do for the name is we're going to do adds. Then the value is going to be adds.sam account name. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to copy paste this line here. Now the only thing is with this line is we are not going to be adding adds.sam account name. We're going to be putting the value of no one. All right. And that should be good. You could even do null here if you really wanted to. Let's see what that gives us. So we're just going to set it to null here. And then what we're going to want to do is let's copy these two lines into the removes, and we're just going to have to slightly modify them. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the add AD group member to remove AD group member, and then change adds to removes. And then we're going to have to add the dash confirm false, because we do not want to have to confirm this. We just want it to do it on its own. And then the add member, we're going to want to do removes. and then change that to removes as well. And then we're going to want to go ahead and do the same thing for the else statement here, but the value once again is going to be null. Okay, perfect. So that should be good. And then we also need to make sure that if the group does not exist, we still need to put the adds and the removes in there just for it to be the same as all the other ones to make sure that our log file is actually going to be valid, or our log object is going to be valid. So all we're going to do is we're going to do an add member at the end here, pass in our result entry, note property adds null, removes null. So you can just copy these from the else statements from above. And that should actually be good here. So if I run this here, we get our result here. So we actually have our validate result. We can see that our programmers exist as false. The create command was not executed, which is perfect. There was no adds, there was no removes. And then we see our group is management. It exists. It already existed. We have adds. We have our 2 users that were added, and we have our 1 user that was removed. So that is actually perfect. That's what we want. So what we're going to want to do is we are going to want to put this all into a function. I like to treat the results and output that to the screen to the user separately, not in this function. This way, if you ever want to modify it a little bit later or something, you can very easily without having to modify this whole function. So let's go ahead and let's put this into a function here. So what we're going to do is we're just going to come above our XML file path variable here, and we are going to create a function called manage groups here, and open and close curly brackets. We're going to do the commandlet binding. We're going to do param. All right, and what we can actually do for the parameters, we can actually just grab our validate group parameters because we're actually going to be using the exact same ones in this case. So it makes it super easy for us. All right, and then what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to grab everything. So everything from this group's downward here, we are going to want to grab, and we are going to want to paste it into our function here. All right, so let me just fix up the layout here. Perfect. All right, so now that we have that here, that should be for the for each. So we should just do this. Whoops. This, and this. And then we're just going to do a return result here. And then for the create switch here, so now that we have all that pasted in here, I'm just going to fix up some of this formatting here. Just bugs me at times when there's some things that aren't formatted properly. No, that looks good. All right, so what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to do the if $create, open and close curly brackets, and then the else statement. What we're going to want to do is we're going to want to stick our groups. So if there is no create, we want to run the validate groups without the create true. If it is with the create, we're going to want to go ahead and create true. And we don't need to run the verbose here anymore. That should not be needed. And like I said, we need to change that XML data variable. So we're just going to change that here. And then that should actually be everything should be good here. We are returning the result. So now if I do manage groups, XML is going to be XML data. Server is going to be server. And let's do, we're not going to do the create. We are actually just going to do manage groups, and we're going to see what that returns for us. So here we are. So we see that we got no users to add, no users to remove. So what we're actually going to do to make this function a little bit nicer, I like to change all the write host to just write verbose. This way, if you ever really want to see the output of it running, you can just call the verbose commandlet, the verbose parameter on the commandlet, and that is just a little bit nicer. You don't really want to see all this stuff anyways. As long as it does what it does, then we're okay. All right, so that should be good. All right, so now if we run this again. All right, so we did our manage groups. We get our output. So we get that the programmers does not exist. Create command was not executed, which is, it's fair. We didn't put it in. And we get our group management. It exists. And there was no adds, there's no removes, no nothing. So that's fine. So what we're going to go ahead and do is, let's go ahead and in the management, let's go and remove one of these users. Let's add a user that does not exist. Put that in there. And let's go ahead and actually put create is true. And let's see what this gives us now. All right, so here we are. So we actually got quite a lot of things. And as we can see, we don't see our removes. So this is where we need to like output it nicely to the screen. And also just reading this isn't very, very nice. So what I like to do is I like to write a little thing here. So let's store the results in result here. And then what I'm actually going to do, just so we can actually get really nice, a really nice output here, we are just going to be resetting this to have the same outcome here. And let's just go ahead and let's run that. And now we have it stored in results. So now let's output this nicely to the screen. So what we're going to do is a for each result in results, open and close curly brackets. First line we're going to do is write output. And we're going to do a dollar sign and wrap it around. We're going to do a result dot. Actually, let's do this so we can get the dot references here. So result dot validate results dot group name. And then we're going to do exists is going to be result dot validate result dot exists. And then we're going to do a notes here. And let's do a result dot validate result dot notes. All right, and then we're going to do a if result dot adds, then an else. Actually, we don't even need to do an else in this case, actually, if I really think about it. So if there's adds, what we're going to do is we're going to do a for each add in result dot adds. And we are going to do a write output added add to result dot validate.group name. Now you could create a variable here to store the group name, so you don't have to do this all the time, but it's not super long, and all we really need to do is another one here. So change the .adds to .removes, change this to remove, change the .adds again to .removes, and then we're going to do a removed, remove, and then change the to from. And then if we actually just run this section here, we will see our output. So we have programmers exists is true. The notes group was created by script. We added Hines B, we added Patterson B, we added Doyle C, we added Malone J, and we removed Wilkins from programmers. So this is actually a problem here because we can't remove something if the group was just created. So what actually happened here is in our script here in the if statement where we set our users belong and our current users, what we need to do is at the beginning, we actually need to clear out our variables. So what I like to do, we could do a remove variables, and we could do name, and then we could do adds, and then we can just do a bunch of these here, and then we're going to do removes, and then let's do compare results. We're just trying to reset all the variables that we can to make sure that we don't get any mistakes in our log, because that could cause us a lot of headaches later on. So now that we have that fixed, let's go ahead. Let's reset our scenario to the exact same scenario as before. So we deleted our programmers. We deleted one of our users from our management. We added a user that does not belong. Let's run that and let's see what our output is now. Okay, so we actually had some errors here. So let's see what this happened because it is null. Okay, so what we're gonna do here is, oops. I believe, yes. So just remove the $signs. I totally forgot that that is actually, you don't need the $signs. You just need to pass the name of the variable and not the variable itself. So let's go ahead and let's just reset this once again. I'm not going to be editing these parts out of the video because I want you guys to know that I still mess up, and these are just like good troubleshooting steps for you guys to know if you guys ever encounter issues, that they are somewhat easy still to find. So I'm still getting some errors here. Cannot find variable, cannot find variable, cannot find variable. But we do see that it actually did work. So what I would like to do in this case, instead of using the remove variables here, because sometimes it might not exist. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to do a adds equals null, removes equals null, compare results equals null, users belong equals null, and then current users equals null. This is what I usually do. I kind of just found out about the commandlet of remove a variable, so I figured I would try it out. Kind of didn't end up in my favor there. So once again, let's just reset our scenario here. And let's see if we get it working here. So if we run this again, no errors, so that's awesome. And we get our output of programmers exist. It's true. The group was created by a script. We've added Hines B, Patterson B, Doyle C, Malone J. And we have our management. It exists. The group already existed. We added Smith F and we removed Wilkins M. So this is perfect. Like, this is awesome. This will manage your groups completely in Active Directory based on titles. You have the script to manage your users as well based on a CSV file. So you can really completely automate your users, automate your security groups this way. You can automate your distribution groups this way. You can do a whole lot of stuff to your Active Directory without having to go in and manually add people to groups, remove people from groups, create their user accounts and delete their user accounts. We've done it all. If you guys have another idea of what you guys would like to do in Active Directory, let me know down below. I will be posting this code to my GitHub as well. So I'll be posting a link to that in the description down below. So if you guys want to see the file, you guys will have it. I will also be putting my XML file that I have there as well. And also on my GitHub, there is the Automate Active Directory users in there as well, which also has the CSV file of the exact same users that I've created here today, and everything is going to be there for you guys. So like, subscribe, hit that notification bell to be notified when that next video comes out, and I will see you on the next video.